Okay, today we're going to be, okay, great. Today we're going to be talking about submittals in ACC. First thing I wanted to go through here is this is the submittal log page. This is where you'll be able to see all the different submittals across your project. It has all the different information of the submittals in a snapshot. So it has different columns about what number, spec section, ball and court. If it is in your court, your name will be highlighted here. But before we get into the actual workflow of the submittals, we're going to go into the submittal settings. So if you go to the right side of your screen here, there are a few different options. I'm going to first press permissions. And as an engineer or a project administrator on your project, you'll be able to add submittal managers. And submittal managers are members of the project that will have full access to your submittals. So you only want to give submittal manager access to project administrators on your project who, need the ability to push through submittals, to have managerial permissions for submittals. So it should only be a few people. So you can do that here by going through the list and adding those members. Default value. So if there is a person, typically the project engineer will be the default manager because they'll take in the submittals and they'll be routing them to the necessary reviewers. Default review time. So when you set up your review workflow, this will be the default amount of work days that will be set. It can still be changed at the time you create your workflow, but this is your default duration for review. And then finally, a default watcher list. So anytime a submittal is created, if a member is here on this list, they will be automatically added as watchers. So a watcher is a person who will have read-only access to submittals. So they won't be able to affect, resubmit, or review a submittal. They're only going to be able to watch the submittal process go through. And next we have responses. So there are a set list of responses here, but if you need to add any other dispositions, you can do so at this settings for responses here. Next we have types. There is a preset list here, and this should cover most of the submittal types. But if you did want to add a different type, then you could do so here. And then advanced settings, global numbering, you can change the numbering method from spec section to regular numbering, but typically it is just done through the normal 1, 2, 3, 4 chronological order numbering. But then the last thing I wanted to get into for settings is review templates. So this is very helpful when you have reviews that go through the same review workflow. So I set up some examples that typical projects go through when setting for reviews. The first one is the designer. So I've clicked this here, and this is the designer workflow. And I've set up a review step here where it goes to the designer. And in this case, Ian Chin would be the designer. And once we get to the submittal workflow step, I'll show you how these will be helpful, especially if you have a preset review workflow with multiple steps, because sometimes it gets humbugged to have to, create the review workflow every time, but instead you'll just be able to create or press a button and then all of the steps will be populated immediately. So this is where you're going to be able to set up these preset review templates in the submittals. Okay, so going back to the submittal log, let's go into one submittal. So in this scenario, we set up a submittal that got submitted by the contractor here, and it got submitted to the submittal manager. So I'm going to take this submittal. So this is in the submittal manager step, and I'm going to prepare the review workflow. So before that, I'm going to go into these boxes. So general information is the information that the contractor filled out when submitting the submittal. So things such as description, spec section, sub-spec section, what type of submittal it is, so on and so forth. We have the activity log on the bottom right where you'll be able to see any activity that the submittal has gone through. This is helpful to see, to track time, to track who is moving the submittal around. And then there's also optional submittal options that the the submitter can utilize. But two of the more important parts of a submittal is the review workflow here and also the references. So if you have any, assets, files, forms, issues, photos, RFIs that pertain to this particular submittal, you can link it here. And then the main workflow right now is only contractor to submittal manager. But the first thing we're going to do when we receive the submittal, we can click this blue link here to view the submittal within ACC. Now you can do this, or you can download the submittal and open it with your own PDF viewer if you prefer that. But you'll still be able to click onto the blue link here and view your submittal. And once you do that, you can take a look at what the submittal is, and then you can decide who needs to review this submittal. So then you can press Add Review Workflow, and you'll be able to send it to the necessary reviewers. So you can also send it to more than one reviewer on each step. So I can submit it to Brandon, and then I could submit it to myself. Now what this will do is it will have two required reviewers. So I'm just going to create this, for example. It's going to have two required reviewers here on the same step. So even if I review it, it will still wait for Brandon to review it as well before moving on to the next step or going back to the manager in this scenario, since there's only one step. So I'm going to go back to Edit Review Workflow. But if I wanted it to be two steps, I could just press this button here, Add a Step. Oh, whoops. Add a second reviewer, and then put myself here. That way it becomes sequential and not a parallel review. So if I click Done, then it's going to have two steps instead of two reviewers in parallel reviewing at the same time. So going back to what I mentioned earlier about review templates, this is where I can, instead of having to select my reviewers every time, I can choose a template. So I can preset the review workflow and click Designer, and I'll override it, and then it'll automatically set it to the preset review workflow that I've chosen, which comes very handy if, again, there's multiple review steps, and so that you don't have to type in their names every single time a submittal comes through that needs to be reviewed with that preset review workflow. So now that we've passed setting up the review workflow, I'm going to submit the submittal for review to the designer in this scenario. So what I'm going to do, a best practice is to copy the attachment here so that the reviewer can see that you took a look at the submittal that the contractor submitted. And then I copied the attachment over here because this is what I want them to review. So then I'm going to click Done. And now it's in the reviewer step. So the reviewer is going to get an email. Anytime anything is put into your court in ACC, you will get an automated email from ACC saying that this particular submittal or RFI or anything is in your court. So this reviewer would get an email. He'll be able to come in here, press Review, and then make the review. So a couple of things here. So we have the response here, where I showed you the preset list of dispositions. Now, if you added more dispositions, you'll be able to see them here. But if not, these are the preset ones that will be available. You'll be able to add your response comment here. And then most importantly, you can attach. So you can either do two things. You can either download the PDF, mark it up in your own PDF viewer, or you can copy it to your step, open it up in ACC, and then you can make markups here. You can make markups, make comments. And then I can press save, and then it's going to ask me what I wanted to title it. Put markups. Then I'll press save, and then what it's going to do is it's going to upload this document with my comments on it. And then I'm going to delete the copied one because I only want one of them. And then I can select my response, say revise and resubmit. And then, so two options, right? I could make my comments within ACC PDF viewer, or I could download and do it, or I can download it, make my markups outside of ACC, and then upload that document back here. And all I have to do there is upload from computer or upload from the project files within ACC. So there's two ways how to upload something with comments if the reviewer has, comments on it. So first, we're going to take an example of a revise and resubmit workflow, and then next we can go through one that is accepted or acknowledged or has a final disposition. So let's say the reviewer made his comments and wanted to revise and resubmit. There's two options. It's going to go back to, after the review workflow is done, it'll go back to the manager. And the manager will then have to decide whether he wants to send it all the way back to the front, or if they would like to close and distribute it and close out the submittal. In this scenario, we see that the reviewer revise and resubmit, or put a revise and resubmit disposition. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new revision and then select the due date as to when you want the contractor to then resubmit this submittal by. So then I can put a note, see review comments. Done. And then what's going to happen is ACC is automatically going to generate a new revision here. So if I want to see what happened in the previous revision, all I have to do is go to Rev 0. Or if there's more revisions, it'll go down the line, Rev 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see the history here of what happened and all of the comments and all of the PDFs that, that happened throughout the submittal workflow. So now let's say the contractor fixes it, resubmits it. So resubmits it. And now the contractor resubmits it. Now it goes back to the submittal manager's spot, right? Goes back to the submittal manager. Now at this step, if you need somebody else to review it, you can also edit the review workflow again. But in this case, we're going to send it back to the same reviewer, copy it over, and then press done. Then now the contractor revised it and it's getting sent to the reviewer again. So now let's say it's approved. Click done. Oh, don't include any. So if you don't have any attachments under your name, it will pop up with the message saying that, are you sure you don't want to include any attachments? So I'm going to copy the submittal over, click done. And then now it shows that this submittal was approved by the reviewer. It goes back into the submittal manager step. And now the submittal manager can decide if they're satisfied with the review from the reviewer and either create new revision again or close and distribute. So in this case, I'm going to close and distribute, select final response. I could make a review comment if I want. And then I need to also copy my attachment to the final response. So that's a best practice so that when the submittal is closed and distributed, it'll have the submittal at the top. So I'm going to click next. And then you see approved and the submittal that was approved. And I click done. And then now this submittal will be closed. It has the final disposition. It has the attachment here. And the submittal is then closed out. So if I go back out to my submittal log, I'll see that the reviewer approved, final response was approved, and the submittal is closed. One more thing I wanted to mention is there are two ways for submittals to be started in ACC. The first way is to have the contractor create the item and submit it here. And the second way you can do it is to, if you have a preset submittal log that has all the requirements for a project, then you can also import it into here, or you could request submittals from the contractor. So you as a project engineer can say, I want the submittal. I would like the traffic control plan. Contractor hasn't submitted it yet, but I want to request it from them. I can write a description of the submittal that I want. I can, I got to select the type. So, and then I can assign it to the contractor. So I'm going to assign it to the contractor. And then I can give them a due date as to when I want them to submit it by. Give a priority. So this is high priority. And then I can press create. Now what it's going to do is it's going to automatically create a submittal, and it's going to be in the contractor's court. Now the contractor just got an email saying that I requested a submittal from them with all of these requirements in it. So the contractor will be able to go into their log saying waiting for submission, and we'll be able to go in, press submit, and then upload their submittal from there. So that's another way to request a submittal from the contractor and work proactively instead of waiting for the contractor to submit the submittal on their end and start the process. Yep, so I think that's it, Josh.
Sounds good. Thanks, Cord. I did have a quick question for the preset workflows. Can you go over how to like maybe create one or where you can create those?
Yeah, so if I go back to Submittal Log, I go into the settings, and then you can click right here, review templates. And then if you want to create one, you add a template, and then you can add a template name. So reviewer 3, and then you'll be able to create the workflow here. So I can create, he needs to review it first, and then this person needs to review it next, and then I can add a third step.
Oh, I see. And you can
so on and so forth. Yeah.
You can assign these like as different steps that are in sequence and not in parallel.
Yes. So this would be, each review step would be in sequence. However, you can also add optional reviewers here if you'd like for people to have a chance to put comments in there. But if they put a comment and they put a review status, it's not going to move it to the next step. It's going to wait until the required reviewer moves it to the next step.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's just more for them to see it. If you want them to.
Yeah. It's more for them if they, if you have somebody that potentially will review it, but it's not the final say, then you can add them as an optional reviewer. But like I said previously, you can also add required reviewers in parallel if you'd like. But in most cases, it's going to be sequential review.
Okay, so then once you do that, really good for other reviews. All right. Okay. Fantastic. That's good. I wanted to add this in because it's good for other kinds of reviews that need like particular people to see it.
Yes,
and you want to send them
this is a really useful feature that I utilize every day. Yeah.
Oh, good. Fantastic. All right. That was a lot. Thank you again for your time. And thanks for showing me submittals.
No problem. Anytime. Yep.